It's nice to know that you guys are personable, reliable, available, and you care. That's a big deal. You know, when we were just talking about, you know, how to pick an attorney, and what I've got here is a list of some questions that we picked up through SEO in activity, so Q&A type. Like, what are the most popular things people ask attorneys? So we're going to touch on a few. We're going to spend a whole lot of time on these types of questions, but I think this is a great opportunity for the viewers to hear and see, you know, the knowledge base, the opportunity that they have when choosing Combs Waterkotte. So let's see, the one big one, and this is just general criminal defense, but is what do you do when you're charged with a crime? What's it like if you had an order of operation or a chronological order, so suddenly you are charged with a crime and you have to start to do something? Like, what is it?
Number one is remain silent. That's critical. Comply with the officer. Does nobody any good to combat, to be hostile, resist, anything like that. Let's deal with it in the courtroom, not the street. Number one is most important, is remaining silent. Right. You do not answer questions. And that even goes for folks that are truly, truly innocent. And it kind of is counterintuitive. Well, if I'm innocent, why shouldn't I just tell the police? Well, it could be an innocuous detail, like I was at this local 7-Eleven getting gas. Well, the robbery that happened there. Now we can tie you there. And that's just an example. Mm-hmm. And that's somebody that's truly innocent, and let's use that hypothetical, and now they just put themselves at the crime scene. So even if you're innocent, don't answer questions. And you can politely decline that, and that's your constitutional right. So
it's a good thing to know, because I think most people think, well, I just need to tell him. I just need to tell him I'm innocent, and here's why.
So many people, and I always tell clients, and I've heard Chris say this too, it's like there is thousands and thousands of people in prisons and jails across this country only for the fact that they talk to the police. I can think of a couple cases that I have right now that but for the fact they spoke to police, they had no evidence and no case against them. And so it is a fundamental constitutional right, but it is also tough for somebody that has police presence, uniformed officers asking them questions, despite the fact that we all know we have a right to remain silent. But, if I don't answer, I look bad or I look guilty. Mm-hmm. And I say, I don't give a damn what it looks like. Right. What we care about is the evidence. So right. I think that is the number one thing is critical.
Just shut up.
Shut up.
Just shut up.
And then number two,
don't incriminate yourself.
Call Combs Waterkotte. We're available 24/7.
Yeah. And
again, there goes back to what I said, is that we are available 24/7.
Yeah.
Things like this don't happen 9 to 5. Yeah. These things happen at midnight and 2, and so call an attorney, call us, and we're available 24/7. And then we start the process of guiding our clients at that point.
Right, which is nice, because when you actually care about your clients, you guide them in a direction that's personal. You're personally invested, so. In guiding them in the right place.
We've got people coming in or going through the most trying times of their lives. Yeah. Yes, as Steve said, we, put the client first. Again, they lean on us not just for legal advice, but, for personal advice and, how to best get themselves through this tough situation that they're facing.
All right. So I love that, that we can just talk like it's normal. Right? Like it feels like these questions are so hard to ask anybody, because you don't know the answer. So in this case, someone gets potentially charged or at least questioned, and then they have no idea. So what they feel like they should do is explain why they shouldn't be charged, and they explain all these great details about why they're innocent and why they should be free because they didn't do anything wrong. And then all that time, which people don't know, all that time they're incriminating themselves. The whole time. It doesn't even matter if they're like, well, my mom likes Coca-Cola for breakfast. It's like, Coca-Cola was at the location and they were missing a Coca-Cola. It's like, holy moly. Like, it doesn't even matter.
And I don't want to come down on law enforcement, but, they're trying to build a case more often than not. And
From before they even arrive on site.
Right, what he just said. They're not there to, hey, I didn't do it. Okay, let's close the book on that and let's exclude him as a suspect.
Right.
Everything they're doing, like Chris said, is they are building a case. They're trained professionals to elicit incriminating information on a person of interest, a suspect. They're not there to say, hey, well, I didn't do it. Okay, we can cross that guy off our list. It's not that easy.
You got too many people watching TV, and these Law and Order shows, and CSI, and they, and a lot of them don't realize that law enforcement is legally allowed to lie when they're investigating a case.
Oh, that's insane.
I know. So,
what?
I mean, it's just kind of a.
So they just rope you into a corner.
Well, sure, they can say, and this is just kind of a silly example, but they can say, look, we've got your DNA at the scene, and they very well don't have their DNA at the scene and to elicit a confession or a statement or
so shut up.
Yeah.
Just shut up. I love that. That's the best.
Shut up.
So really there is no
Lawyer
chronological order of what to do. There is just shut your mouth and call Combs and Waterkotte.
That's right. And then we take it from there. Like I said, we don't let the police battle in the streets. Our battles are in the courtroom.
Right.
And then we try to at that point, whether who's ever the first person in contact with them is this applies for Chris, Matt Brown, our associate, is when we get them in, we want them to see this big picture. Mm-hmm. We try to provide them as much information in a way that they'll understand.
Sure.
Not legalese and jargon that, these folks don't understand. Is like, let's look at this big picture. Let's look at what you're facing. And then from there, let's understand and develop their goals, reasonable goals, based on this case, based on the evidence. And so they have the information at hand. And a lot of times at that stage, you don't have a ton. You're waiting on the police reports and the.
It's so much circumstantial.
Yeah, but we want them to know what this big picture looks like, and understand their goals, so we can formulate a plan to get them to that point.
What's the confidence level for communicating with your attorney? So you hire an attorney. Like, what can you tell him?
Say that
if you hire an attorney, can you tell him you're guilty? Can you say?
I am confident in saying this.
Yeah.
It might sound boastful or whatever. Is that I am confident that we are the most accessible lawyers in the city. And like I said, everyone has our cell phone numbers.
Right.
And it may be to a fault on ourselves, or to the detriment of our families.
Sure.
I've been at basketball games. I've been coaching my own kid, or at a gymnastics event where I've stepped out and answered the call, phone calls. Again, they need us.
Sure.
This isn't a 9-to-5 gig, and so I would put us against anybody. And again, I don't say that in a boastful way, but I would, text message. I'm text responding.
That's awesome.
Chris does. We have a group chat amongst the lawyers in our firm. Just for an example, this past weekend, I was leaving town this past Thursday, and we had a very serious case involving a young woman, and she was locked up. And we had an all hands on deck approach. As I'm leaving town, I was the lead attorney. I'm the lead attorney as a referral to me. Mm. Yet I'm leaving town, back to resources, and yet Chris and Matt and multiple members of our staff, 5 probably throughout the weekend, are coordinating, making jail visits to see her on a weekend, to keep her informed, talking with her father, talking with her boyfriend. We had, despite, again, going back to this resources, I'm out of town, yet we had Chris, who did a fabulous job stepping in and kind of quarterbacking that, despite the fact that I'm, halfway across the country.
That's so good.
Again,
that's like a warm and fuzzy. Like I don't think I would associate
And
warm and fuzzy with
at the
with
ending to that, she got out of
attorneys,
jail.
But that is.
She got out of jail yesterday.
Oh, that's so good.
And she sent us a wonderful text saying, couldn't thank your firm, enough. Because it was an all hands on deck.
That's awesome.
Over the course of a weekend. Or even into this week until yesterday, getting her out. And again, that is why that is paramount. Is number one, is getting them out of jail on a reasonable bond, a bond that they can afford in post.
No, let's say they lock in, right? They pick you guys, Chris, and your client walks in. I mean, can he tell you he's guilty? What can he say?
Yeah,
is he protected from what he says?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, attorney-client privilege is paramount, that relationship. So unless it's an ongoing crime, we don't have any ethical obligation other than to keep, attorney-client communication private. It's very rare that a client's going to say, "Hey, look, I did this.
Yeah.
Or, I didn't do it." I
Look me up.
Yeah, a lot of people, like to ask that question, but it just doesn't come up. And I know Steve, can weigh in on this, but I got to be honest, I don't care. I mean, I'm here to defend someone, and that's all that matters. So, I mean, if they want to tell me, great, but it doesn't matter to me because the United States Constitution and everyone deserves a defense.
Sure.
And I agree precisely with him, and I always add is, I don't care either. And people go, I mean, that's the most common question you get when you're somewhere, right?
Sure.
And someone goes, "What do you do for work?" "I'm a criminal defense." How can you defend those people? How can you defend somebody that is guilty, right? That's the question that always comes up. And, back to what Chris said, I don't care. What my personal belief is about whether they did it or not has zero bearing on their case. We want to know, and furthermore, we're not here to make moral, judgments on people. What my personal, did he do it or didn't he do it, it will not affect in any way, shape, or form how Chris, Matt, or myself handles a case. They could say they're guilty. I'm going to still provide them the most vigorous defense.
Well,
maybe that might not be a trial.
Yeah.
It might be mitigation, getting them a soft landing spot. But it sounds super counterintuitive. Well, don't you need to know? No, I don't. I need to know what evidence that they have against my client.
I think there's a big part of that, which if you were kind of put it into perspective, is that they don't know all the time whether or not they're actually guilty. So they may think they're guilty of a crime, but in reality, they're not. Yet they may think they've done something specifically that would make them categorically charged or convicted of a crime, but maybe not. So you leave that open,
correct,
throughout the entire process because it's only fair to the client. Because you can't practice to protect them from themselves, mostly, without leaving that wide open, right? It has to be.
And use like DWI for an example. I mean, you're not a human BAC, blood alcohol content reader. I mean, you don't know if you're, most people know when they've hit a stage of intoxication, right? But you don't know if you're at a 0.08 or not.
Sure.
You don't know how you fared on the test on the side of the road. You weren't trained in that. So yeah, like that's an example of one where somebody might be, I had a couple drinks, but was I drunk or not?
Yeah.
Well, that's where we step in, and that's when we're looking at those police reports and conducting our own investigation, whether or not what our defenses are.
Well, I don't know if you wrote this interview, but it's a great segue.
All right,
Steve, I appreciate you. So as it relates to breathalyzers, blood tests, like, of course, shut your mouth. We're at that stage where now we can just move forward on all of this. Just shut your mouth. We know that. But then, should they take the breathalyzer? Should they do a blood test? I mean, what is it that they should say yes to, or can they say no?
I mean, my opinion on that, and every defense lawyer, I think, has a different opinion, but I would always say absolutely not. I mean, all you're doing is providing more evidence. The only time I would ever advise anyone to submit to blood, breath, or urine test and a DWI investigation is I had one glass of wine at a happy hour, and
And I left 15 minutes later, and suddenly I'm a .086 or something silly,
Sure,
right?
but all you're doing is providing more evidence for them. So I would say, refuse all tests, refuse field sobriety tests. Some defense lawyers say, do it. I like to pick apart the breathalyzer. I like to pick apart the cop's investigation. But in my opinion, you're just giving them more evidence. I'd let Steve weigh in on that.
I concur with Chris. Unless you know that, hey, I had nothing to drink. And this
But nothing means like nothing.
That's my opinion.
Yeah,
absolutely.
like not a single
correct.
drop.
If I got
of
pulled
alcohol.
over leaving the studio, and they asked for a breathalyzer, well, I would still decline it because I'd tell them I don't need to do it. But that's another story. But if I could take that, and I know I'm going to blow zeros across the board, that would be the only time. I agree with Chris. I think as a general rule. And that's another question I'm sure we get, when you're at a cocktail function and people are drinking.
Should you blow?
Right. What do I do when I get pulled over?
Right.
And I say, as a general rule, do not do it. And I agree completely with Chris. It's just providing them another piece of evidence. There's a reason they want you to do it.
But even if you blow and you're zeros, isn't the field sobriety subjective?
It is.
It is.
Yeah, so I would never do that.
Yes, because there's plenty of people who refuse to blow, and then they're still charged. So it's just based on the officer's observations.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And there's what we call standardized field sobriety tests. And the typical three are the walk and turn, the one leg stand, and the horizontal gaze nystagmus, which is the pen in front of you or the fingertip. And so most folks have heard that or seen it, or they're looking at certain criteria. I get people that say, well, I passed those. Well, you wouldn't know, as the subject of the field sobriety test. But you always have, every individual, you, me, Chris, we all have a choice. You're not under any obligation to take those. Again, what are those designed to do? Provide the officer with additional evidence.
It's just mounting evidence.
So now all of a sudden you have your field sobriety test, the three that I mentioned. Then they get a breath test result. I mean, that can be damning evidence at that point. Now you remove that. What are you left with? Is what Chris said. The officer's observations. Well, we smelled the alcohol. I mean, you're removing a whole bunch of evidence that they would use against you. Much easier case to beat at that point, right? Yeah. I mean, it's kind of common sense.
Did you say that you deny to participate in any of these things? Like, you're going to get arrested, right?
Well, are you going to get arrested? The question then is, would you get arrested after doing those?
Well, yeah.
And so, again, let's balance the two.
Right.
Okay, arrest me. You're going to be arrested after the field spray if you've been drinking or you're in an intoxicated condition. So, you're getting arrested either way.
Yeah.
Now you're just removing again the strength of the state's case or the prosecutor's arrest, or the police officer's arrest. And so
the second a traffic stop turns into a DWI investigation, that's when you just need to say, if you believe, that I'm under the influence, go ahead and take me into custody.
Book me, right.
Exactly.
I'll get out of the car when I'm arrested.
Sure. I mean, some of this stuff is hard to do sober. Try standing on one leg with
I know
your
that.
foot, 6 inches off the ground, for 10 seconds.
And speaking of what Chris said, there's so many clients that will say that. Dude, I couldn't do this sober. Right. Well, that very statement, think about this. That very statement just says that you've been drinking or you're...
Exactly.
How many people say that?
I can't do this sober.
They go, I couldn't do this sober, officer. You're going, well, so you're not sober right now. And they just back to...
I would say I don't study Tai Chi, so I'm not doing the whole 6-inch off the ground thing. I don't do that.
I was pulled over one time. I'll give you an example. It's a true story. Pulled over, had not been drinking. The officer, my wife and I driving home, just got off a long plane ride, trying to get home to see my daughter, who was an infant at the time, before the babysitter, before she went to bed. Officer says, get in my vehicle. I had nothing to drink, but I'm jet lagged. It's been a long weekend. I'm at the airport. And he asked if I would do field sobriety tests. True story, on the side of 55. And, again, it's been a long weekend. I'm jet lagged. I'm saying, No, I won't, but I'll blow into a PBT. Well, he looked at me immediately and goes, are you a police officer or an attorney?
Right.
Because I knew PBT, which is portable breath test, and I knew that would read zeros. But I wasn't, again, I had nothing to drink at the airport. I just was on a 4-hour flight. I don't want to be on the side of the road, tired, and putting my leg in the air if I can maintain it in this position. Like Chris said, these tests are designed, and they're difficult.
Sure, and sometimes they throw odd ones out, like count backwards,
right.
From 86 to 72, or, go backwards in the alphabet from C to W, I mean, it's...
Yeah, so, it's not natural for somebody to go walking heel to toe, right? How often? You don't do that, do you?
I never do that.
Exactly.
I'm never going, I'm never going to do that.
How often do you practice with one leg on the ground and one in the air?
Like I said, I don't take Tai Chi.
And your finger on your nose.
I'm not doing that.
Or, following this over here. And
Yeah.
here. I mean, these aren't natural movements.
I would ask I'd like to see the pen. You know what I mean? If it's a nice pen, I'd consider it.
Can you take it?
Yeah, I maybe. Because if it's a cheap pen, like grabbed it from a poker table at his buddy's house, I'm not into that. I'm not following that pen.
So again, shows you that I was completely sober. The machine reads. I said to give me a PBT. He didn't give me the PBT, and he cut me loose. But
he's like, this is a waste of time.
But I mean, again, I'd be over there on the side of the road, and I'm not. I probably would fail the damn things.
So the key is, I think, to take into account the walk away of like what do you do, and you're getting possibly DWI, possibly not, more than likely not, or possibly so. Like, don't be afraid to get arrested.
And that's a huge thing because people are intimidated by police.
Yeah,
naturally.
well, get intimidated by being arrested.
Sure.
Period. You're gonna put cuffs on me. You're gonna put me in the back of a police car. I feel like my life's already starting to end. At that point, I get put in the back of blue.
Sure,
I'm like,
by cooperating, you're helping them, build their case. I mean,
Right.
you're giving them evidence. So, again, it sounds counterintuitive, but, back to shut up, right?
yeah, shut up and let them arrest you.
Sure.
Just go in, because then, you go in and then you go home and they've got no evidence and they've got no talkie-talkie to push buttons and create cases and then you call you guys and then it's over.